The patience of Job. Job was a wealthy and righteous man who lived in the land of Uz. He was known for his piety, integrity, and devotion to God. In heaven, Satan questioned Job's faithfulness, suggesting that Job was only righteous because he had been blessed with wealth and prosperity. God allowed Satan to test Job's faith, but he was not allowed to harm Job himself. Satan caused a series of disasters. Job's wealth was destroyed, his livestock stolen, and his servants killed. In a tragic event, Job's 10 children died when a house collapsed on them during a feast. Satan afflicted Job with painful sores from head to toe. Job, in immense suffering, sat on ashes and scraped his skin with broken pottery. 3 of Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, came to comfort him. They initially sat with him in silence for 7 days, but when Job began to speak, they engaged in a series of debates about the nature of suffering and God's justice. Eliphaz is one of Job's friends who comes to visit him after he experiences his misfortunes. He is often considered the most senior of Job's friends and speaks first in their dialogues. Eliphaz represents the viewpoint that suffering is a consequence of sin. He urges Job to repent and seek God's forgiveness, believing that this will alleviate his suffering. Bildad is another of Job's friends who speaks in the dialogues. He subscribes to the same belief as Eliphaz that suffering is a result of sin. Bildad argues that Job's children must have sinned to deserve their fate and advises Job to turn to God for mercy. Zophar is the third of Job's friends. Like Eliphaz and Bildad, Zophar believes that Job's suffering is a consequence of his sins. He urges Job to repent and implies that Job's suffering could have been even worse if he had received his due punishment. Job reflects on the value of wisdom, asserting that true wisdom comes from fearing God. He defends his integrity, listing various good deeds he has done and expressing his longing for a fair hearing before God. A younger man named Elihu, who has been silently listening to the conversation, becomes angered by the inability of Job and his friends to adequately address the situation. He introduces himself and prepares to speak. Elihu delivers a series of speeches. He rebukes Job for justifying himself rather than God, emphasizes God's justice, and contends that suffering can serve as a means of discipline and correction. Elihu speaks about God's greatness and power, preparing the way for God's direct response. God finally speaks to Job out of a whirlwind, asking a series of rhetorical questions that highlight the vastness of his knowledge and power. God's questions emphasize the limits of human understanding and the complexity of the natural world. Job realizes the depth of God's wisdom and acknowledges his own limited perspective. Job repents for questioning God, and God restores his fortunes. He blesses Job with twice the wealth he had before and grants him new children. Job's friends are rebuked for their false accusations, and Job is reconciled with God. The narrative explores the concept of suffering, showcasing Job's unwavering faith even in the face of immense hardship. It emphasizes God's ultimate control over all things, even in the midst of human suffering. Job learns the limits of human understanding and the need for humility before the divine. The story challenges simplistic notions of divine reward and punishment, suggesting that God's justice operates on a deeper level than mere cause and effect.